The mayor is a very interesting character to watch on screen, and a big part of that is due to his dual nature. On the one hand, he's very much a sitcom dad. He's charming, he's charismatic, he's friendly, he has a lot of dad-like jokes, he's very silly, he's afraid of germs, he hates swearing, and he has a very clean persona. But on the other hand, he is undeniably evil. He is soulless, and what I find so interesting about this particular character is what he represents, which is the abuse of power. And of course, it's a very clear allegory when it comes to Buffy, but at the same time, I think it really provides a good visual for what we see in politicians. That he is ultimately a snake. He's someone who's incredibly dangerous because of the fact that he's so charming, because it's so easy to be seduced by this type of character. And I think it really goes to demonstrate the manipulative power that these types of individuals have. While he comes off as incredibly likable, he's also incredibly terrifying. It's because he has this friendly persona that makes his evil side feel so unsettling. But first, let's start from the beginning. Richard Wilkins came to California in the 1800s, and that's where he found the Hellmouth, and he decided to build the town of Sunnydale on the Hellmouth with the agreement that the demons would be able to roam freely and feed on humans. And at the same time, Richard Wilkins made deals with the demons, including the selling of his own soul in order to gain immortality.
I swear, I would sell my soul for a decent short game. Of course, it's a little late for that.
Additionally, in 1899, Richard Wilkins decided to plan his ascension. So in 100 years, he made a plan to turn into an old demon called Olvican. And in 1903, Richard Wilkins married Edna May, and he remained with her until her death. So even though he was immortal, he stayed with her until she passed away. And towards the end, things got a little rough because she continued to age, even though he continued to love her and he stayed with her. And this is the advice that Richard gives to Angel and Buffy about their relationship. And I find this tidbit to be really interesting, and I find it interesting how they squeezed that into the storyline. I think that it was done in order to give an evil being or a bad guy some really good advice to the main characters, but at the same time, it also reveals something interesting about Richard Wilkins, which is the fact that at his core, there is something that demonstrates the fact that he has a deep connection to others, that he has that desire for it, that even after selling his soul, even after gaining immortality, he wanted to remain with the woman that he loved, that deep down, when he says that he's a family man, he means it. And he does develop a strong attachment, and his dad-like persona can in some ways be explained by the fact that that's who he wanted to be originally, that he wanted to have a family, he wanted to have a partner, and he has developed attachments to people throughout his life. And another small tidbit is that as Richard continued to live on, he pretended to be his own son. So by the time that we meet him in 1999, he is Richard Wilkins III because he had to sort of pretend that he is his own son throughout the centuries, even though originally he is Richard Wilkins I. And we first hear about the mayor in season 2 in I Only Have Eyes for You when Snyder is talking to a police chief, and the police chief is warning Snyder of the fact that he's going to report everything to the mayor, and we see that Snyder is absolutely terrified. The mayor comes off as the quintessential politician. So he is very diplomatic, and like I mentioned, he's very charismatic and he's very charming, and we kind of get the impression that he's also very hardworking. So he takes his job seriously. And we see this when he's even down in the sewers and he's about to do his tribute to Larconis.
Call Dave on the Public Works Committee tomorrow about sewer maintenance and repair. I have some concerns regarding exposed gas pipes.
We see on his to-do lists, we see on other things that he's doing that he's actually doing his job. So while he's preparing for his 100-year-old ascension, he's also very devoted to making sure that Sunnydale is running, which is kind of comical and also kind of ironic at the same time. He's going to be basically destroying everything, but he still cares enough about the foundation of the town. And when he says that he believes the children are the future, it seems like he kind of believes it. He does believe that children must be controlled, but we also see him taking photos with the Boy Scouts. We see that he's very diplomatic in his discussions and negotiations with others. And he also presents a very strong image to the town. So in Gingerbread, when he comes up to give a speech, he gives a very political, compassionate speech. The type of speech that you would expect from a quote-unquote good politician. So he exudes this image of diplomacy, of someone who is very hardworking, of someone who tries really hard. And we even see this in his conversation with demons. So his persona doesn't change when he's dealing with evil and when he's dealing with good. So we see that even in his dealings with Mr. Trick, he comes off as very diplomatic, very kind, very professional. And we even see this in his relationship with Faith in the very beginning, which I'll get to. And at the same time, we see that he has developed this schmoozing ability. He has learned to engage in banter. He knows how to small talk. It's hard to tell whether or not it's his true persona or something that he's developed over time, because as a politician, I think that one learns that they have to know how to schmooze. They have to learn how to come off as very friendly and likable, because as long as you're likable, people will come to like you and they will come to forgive you for the different things that they do. And we see that comes off of him. So in his conversations with Mr. Trick, he jokes around with him. He plays around. He has very chatty, casual conversations. I also think that this is what makes the mayor so much fun to watch, because he is very funny. He switches from being very serious to very comical.
It's gonna be a whole new world come nightfall. Don't want to weaken now. And boys, let's watch the swearing.
And he's very quirky at the same time. So there's some things that I think he did not develop that he just naturally had. For example, his germophobia, which likely comes from his childhood. His fear of germs is completely irrational and absolutely dumb, considering that he can't die, but yet he's still very staunch about being cleanly. And I think his idea of not swearing and having a very clean persona is something that I think he inherently has.
Gosh, I'm feeling chipper. Who's for a root beer?
And I absolutely love the fact that he was insistent upon finishing his speech at graduation. So here we have a being that's been alive for over 100 years, and he's been planning to turn into an old one, but yet he really wants to convey his ideas about civic pride to these graduating students who are going to be dead in a few minutes, because he's just so committed to the bit. On the darker side of things, we do see the fact that he has a very evil side. He's ruthless. And there are times that while he's acting friendly, he switches to the true evil self. And I think that those moments are very terrifying. I think the scariest scene with him is in the library when he comes in very nonchalantly, very calmly, and he just talks to the gang. And we see the fact that he deep down has a very dark side to him. And it kind of goes to show what I think the writers were trying to convey with this character, which is the fact that even though he has this outside friendly persona, that's not who he is on the inside. And I really like this aspect because I think that it is so easy for us to be so swayed by very charming and charismatic leaders. And simply because someone is quirky and funny and friendly and charming and kind doesn't mean that they're necessarily a good person. Someone could learn these qualities over time. And as we know with politicians, it's so easy for power to corrupt. And that's absolutely what Mayor Richard Wilkins represents. The corruption of power, that as soon as he had the power, it doesn't matter how funny he is, how quirky he is, how friendly he will still come to destroy the town. So speaking of destruction, I want to talk about the mayor's plan. And I think that when it comes to Buffy the show, it's best not to think too much about the details of all the villains, because once you get into the thick of things, things get a little bit confusing as to why they were doing what they were doing and how they planned on going about doing it. And so when it comes to the mayor, we know that he wanted to become an old demon called Olvican, and that it took him 100 years to reach this ascension, and that for this ascension, he would turn into a giant snake, which, like I mentioned, is very symbolic of how we see politicians as giant snakes. And so in this giant snake form, he would then eat a whole bunch of children, which would then allow him to gain more power. And so during this phase, when he's a snake, he is able to be killed. So he's no longer immortal. So the question for me becomes, why is he doing it? Is it purely for the power, which is fine, which makes sense for his character. He's a politician and he's been corrupted by power and he wants to gain more power. And so, of course, becoming an old demon would give him even more power. But then the question is, what happens afterwards? What does that look like? Is he just going to be a snake?
Does anybody else miss the mayor? I just want to be a big snake.
And if so, why would he want to be a giant snake? I mean, he loses opposable thumbs, which I think are pretty freaking great. So what is he just going to be slithering around the earth at this point? I mean, it's very just ungainly, and he loses the ability to do a lot of things that he loves, such as, golfing and reading comics. And so a few theories have been proposed to explain what the direction of the mayor's plan was. One is that he would have potentially gone to a different dimension, so that once he consumed enough lives, he would have then transcended to another dimension. He wouldn't have been on Earth anymore, which could still theoretically work with the mayor's message to Faith.
Maybe we won. And right now, I'm on some jumbo monitor in the Richard Wilkins Museum surrounded by a bunch of kids.
The other theory is that the snake is just a temporary form during the feeding phase. So once he consumes enough lives, then he would transform into something else that's all-powerful, something like Jasmine or Illyria on Angel. So something that could take human form, but is also at the same time incredibly powerful. And the snake-eating phase is just this temporary phase where he's vulnerable and where he has to be this particular size in order to consume as many lives as possible. And I kind of like this theory. It makes a bit more sense because he gains a lot more power, but at the same time is able to shapeshift into something else. And I think the other possible explanation is that the show didn't think about it specifically. So I think that when it comes to this character, they had it planned out that they want a giant epic battle at the end. They want something that looks cool. Even though nowadays the CGI doesn't really impress us as much and maybe it looks a little tacky perhaps. But I remember watching this originally and the graduation scene was incredible, but looking back, I think it kind of looks very small because there aren't that many students really. And the thing that always bothers me with that particular scene is that we see all the parents run away. So at graduation, not only are there just a few students, but also there are only a few parents, and the parents just bounce as when they see changes. And I feel like that's incredibly unrealistic. I mean, certainly there are some parents out there who just run away, but I imagine the majority of them will be like, let me grab my kid. The second that you see something terrifying happening, I think the automatic thought would be, where are my children? Because at the end, what we're seeing is the children fighting the battle. All the children unite together, and of course it's supposed to be symbolic of their graduation. It's not really about them fighting a demon, it's about them entering the real world. I think it's also entirely possible that the show didn't really have a specific plan for what they wanted the mayor to look like at the very end, what his initial intent was, but I do like the potential theory that he would have then transformed into a different kind of being after the ascension, or perhaps would have gone to a different realm. Because I do think it would have been kind of comical if the mayor were just slithering around in this massive form on Earth by himself, where everybody else is just much smaller, and where are they going to maintain him? Is he just going to be in the ocean? I don't know. Anyway, moving on. And now coming to the most interesting aspect of the mayor and his character, which is his relationship with Faith. And there are quite a few divisive opinions on this particular relationship. On the one hand, some people feel that it's just absolutely icky, that he completely corrupted Faith. It was abusive, it was controlling, it was manipulative, and he ended up leaving her much, much worse off and in a lot of trauma, that she would have been much better off if she never encountered him. And on the other hand, some people feel that while it was an unhealthy relationship, he did truly care for her, and it did give some sort of a security to Faith that she was going on a dark path. It wasn't necessarily the mayor that led her astray, and it was not a healthy relationship, but this is the kind of unhealthy relationship that was used on the show as a parallel to Giles and Buffy's relationship. And I fall into the later camp, so I do believe that their relationship was incredibly unhealthy, and at the same time, it was fascinating to watch on screen because what the show seemed to convey is the fact that despite the fact that he was soulless and evil, he started to care for her as if she was his child, that he became a dark father figure for her, and his relationship was a foil, a contrast to Buffy and Giles, that even though it was deeply unhealthy, there was a bond and a connection there. So was there control and manipulation? I would say yes, there was to an extent, but I do not believe that it was the intent for the mayor to destroy Faith or to make her worse off. So I do believe that Faith was a child soldier for the mayor naturally, and she did his bidding. But at the same time, to say that the mayor was responsible for leading Faith astray and for forcing her into this dark path, I think takes away some of Faith's agency. Because as we can see, Faith had started on this path before she encountered the mayor. We see that she started to distance herself from the group, and it was with the death of Alan that really started her on this path. She experienced regret, And she was worried about the situation. She did feel guilt that she accidentally killed Alan, but at the same time, she made the choice to cover it up and then blame Buffy. And we do see that things started to get more and more violent from her end. I mean, the attack on Xander from her end is really hard to watch. That was before she encountered the mayor. That was her violent side coming out and deeply hurting one of the main characters in a way that really just seems gruesome and horrific. And then we see that it is Faith who chooses to come to the mayor. And that happened with zero influence for the mayor. She never met him before. She may have maybe even seen him on TV, but she had no knowledge of him except for the fact that he was evil, except for the fact that she knew that she killed Mr. Trick, who was important to him. But she made the decision herself to go the dark side. And I believe that this was necessary for Faith's arc on the show, that this was part of her journey, that she had to be the one to make the decision to come to the mayor without his influence. All he did was open the door, but she made the choice to come to him and to walk through that door. And when Faith starts working for him, we see that she doesn't actually experience pressure in the same way. But at the same time, we do see that the mayor uses his influence or his knowledge to sway her, which I think comes from his political side. So he puts her up in a very nice apartment with lots of amenities. He gets her a PlayStation, gets her a gorgeous place, gets her things, and for the first time in her life, she's comfortable. And from the mayor's side, it's a very intelligent political move because he knows that this girl, even though she looks like just a little girl, packs a lot of power and she's incredibly powerful and strong. Could probably do a lot more damage than she looks like she could do. And because of that, he knows better. He's not going to put her up in a terrible motel. He knows where she lives. And he knows that once you give someone nice things, once you actually let them feel comfortable, especially for someone like a 17-year-old who's on her own in a dirty motel by herself with nothing, giving her all these things would make her more amenable to work for him. And it is a smart move on his part. Is it manipulative? Well, yes, I believe certainly, but that is how politicians kind of operate. And this is not to say that Faith is so easily swayed by all of these things. We do see that there's an expression of concern when the mayor says that he's going to kill her friends. And he knows that he can't push her too hard. And he tells her that he's not going to ask her to do it, not yet anyway, because he understands that this is someone who still has attachments. But at the same time, we do see that Faith is happily doing other things for the mayor because she has also started to develop an attachment. And this attachment, it was not done through force, but simply by the fact that for the first time in her life, she finally felt like someone was looking after her or cared about her. So there are a few examples where we see that Faith is extra violent and aggressive, and it seems like it's coming from her. For example, when she shoots Angel, she's very gleeful about it. She's very happy about it. A part of it comes from the fact that she's bitter by the fact that she couldn't seduce him. But this happiness is not coming from the mayor or for his approval, but from her. And there are times when she asks him, who can I kill? Who can I maim?
You gotta give me something to do. There's no way I'm sleeping. Don't you need anyone dead or maimed? I can settle for maimed.
And also we have this example where she kills the guy who was supposed to deliver the box, even though the mayor didn't ask her to do it. So she went out of her way to murder somebody, even though that's not what the mayor even asked for or wanted. So from his perspective, he sees that she takes initiative. Now, this is not to say that this relationship wasn't toxic, because it absolutely was. There were two elements to this dynamic. So one was an element of control and manipulation, even though he deeply cared for her. And I believe the show made it very clear that his love for her was genuine, and we see this absolutely in the final episode where he becomes overly concerned with the fact that she's missing, and he's completely numb and distraught when he finds out that she's in a coma. And it's the fact that he cares about her so much that at the end, Buffy was able to control him or to egg him on with the knife that he got for Faith. So when it comes to this relationship, we do see two sides. The one side is that he treats Faith like a little kid, and on the other hand, he treats her in a very controlling way. So first, let's start with the mayor's treatment of Faith as a kid. So the impression that we get when we first meet Faith is that she's a girl that was forced to grow up really, really fast. When we see her, she's kind of like an adult. And it's interesting because Eliza Dushku was just 17 years old in the third season. So she was a little kid, but the way that she's styled, the way that she's presented, the way that she's acting is designed to show that this is someone who was forced to grow up really fast. And throughout the season, we get a lot of hints as to how she grew up. She grew up in a very rough environment with a lot of violence, a lot of death, and she couldn't trust anybody. So she was an adult by the time that we meet her, in essence. And when she starts interacting with the mayor, the impression that I get is that the mayor is not giving her permission to be an adult. So while she's trying to act like she's grown up to act, with her terrible interactions with men, with the violence, with the aggression, the mayor is kind of treating her like, no, as a 17-year-old, or actually he's treating her like a 12-year-old. Like he's not letting her be the person that she's become, because he gives her PlayStations, he yells at her for wearing shoes in the bed, he makes her drink milk, he tells her things like, you should pull your hair back, you should wear a dress. And early on in their relationship, the show tries to make it clear that their dynamic is not going to be intimate. It's not going to be physical. There's no actual attraction, because as soon as Faith starts to treat the mayor as a sugar daddy, the mayor rejects her outright and very strongly, saying,
Now, Faith, I don't find that sort of thing amusing. I'm a family man.
So from the very outset of their relationship, it's established the fact that this is not what their dynamic is going to be. That the mayor put a really hard close on this type of a dynamic, and he wants to treat her more like a kid. He wants to establish a fatherly dynamic that at the end, he tells her,
no father could be prouder.
Now, the other side of their dynamic is the fact that he's still evil, he's still soulless, and his love is in fact conditional. So Faith is working for him. She is his child soldier, and he does ask her to do terrible things, one of which is seducing Angel, which one would not ask a child to do, but that is part of their plan. And we don't see the conversation beforehand of him asking her, but we do see the conversation afterwards of Faith saying that she's disappointed that it didn't work. And we also see the fact that the mayor is not afraid to hurt Faith, or at least he's very threatening towards her. There's a point where Faith is questioning whether or not she'll be able to get the Books of Ascension, and the mayor makes it clear that if she fails him, there will be consequences for her.
If you failed me in that way, well, replacing Mr. Trick was chore enough.
And there are times when he's also very stern with her.
Faith, I don't like repeating myself.
So the way that he treats her, it's as if he wants her to depend on him. And that's what he conveys through his words. So there are two lines that stood out to me that come off as incredibly manipulative. And one line is,
You don't see me looking disappointed, do you? Heck no. You know why? Because I know you'll always have me, Faith. I'm the best, the most important friend you'll ever have.
And the other line is in the video that he sent her, and he tells her,
See, the hard pill to swallow here is that once I'm gone, your days are just plain numbered.
So through these lines, the mayor is conveying the message that she needs him. He's the best thing for her, and it's possible he genuinely believes that. But at the same time, it's conveying this message that she cannot survive without him. And once he's gone, there's nothing left for her. There's no point for her to live, which is almost kind of what he says in that message, that here's this trinket, you could switch bodies, because look, you're going to be doomed anyway, so you might as well go out with a bang. So he had no faith in Faith's survival, ironically. And it seems like he really does believe in the fact that he's the best thing for her. He's the only thing in her life that's ever going to matter. He's her best friend. And even though he genuinely believes this, it's incredibly unhealthy to convey to another person, specifically to a person like Faith, who has had a very traumatic childhood, who has lived through so many horrible things, who's very vulnerable, and who for the first time in her life had someone that she could depend on. And hearing these things would let her internalize these ideas and these concepts, and she would feel even more lost as a result. So even though I do believe that this was an interesting dynamic and that he truly cared for her, I do think that it was ultimately a toxic relationship, that even years later, Faith still felt like she had a bond to him, and it was incredibly confusing to her because even though she knew that he was evil, she also felt that she was cared for, and she could still not break that bond with him, that the evil was able to take his form because the mayor had such an influence on her. So I definitely think that the mayor's relationship with Faith has left Faith with some scars, and he did truly care about her. And the things that he said, was it done for control? Well, I would certainly say that initially, but over time he started to actually care about her. He could only care about her to the extent that he's physically capable of, that because he doesn't have a soul, he's not fully able to love her unconditionally and actually care more about her than about himself. And so it was a corrupted love, but it was real. And I believe that for Faith, it did create a very complicated relationship that she was actually cared for the very first time, but at the same time, the person who cared about her was someone who was incredibly evil. So yeah, there's a lot to be said about this relationship, and I think that there could be so much more covered with respect to Faith. Faith is such a fascinating character, and I would love to talk about her someday. I do like her character a lot. Her arc is incredible, and I only covered a tiny piece of it now, so perhaps I'll cover her in the future. We'll see. And I would like to say that I know that I haven't made that many Buffy videos. They haven't been as popular, but I would like to continue to make Buffy videos in the future. It is my favorite show. I won't be making them as often, but if a lot of people if people subscribe based on Buffy videos, or if there's a lot of engagement, that gives me a sign that I should make more videos in the future focused on Buffy. So if you like this video, hit like. If you want to see more Buffy content, think about subscribing perhaps, and please feel free to share all your comments down below. Thank you so much, and I appreciate you guys.